So, in all fairness, she's working on her PhD, and she's just finished her dissertation and started her residency. So, she's been pretty busy. So I'll probably get in the mail tomorrow. So I apologize for not having that. First of all, I'd like to thank you all, this church and everything. I'm recovering from multiple fractures in my right hand. I have 2 giant buckets full of get well cards from y'all and balloons and just been wonderful. You know, it's so important to belong to a Christian fellowship and for men to support each other too. I think this group is a really good thing to get started with. And I have to tell you, whenever you need somebody, and also it's always good for us to help each other out, but it's just when you go through health issues, we've all been talking about health issues, it's just great to have that support and just encouraging words. Even the emails are great, so I just really appreciate everybody. I'm still disabled and it's driving me crazy, so I'm the pitch hitter today. I was supposed to get Paul Tribble as the speaker. Paul Tribble, as you all know, is the president at CNU. He used to be a U.S. senator. Paul is a good friend of mine. That just means I live in Newport News. That's all that means. Paul has a lot of good friends. In fact, we did a big bash for him on his 70th birthday, and it was around Christmas time, so not too many people showed up, only 1,200 people. So it was a little small gathering for Paul. But Paul, unfortunately, we all pray for him. He fell on his boat on a boat ride a couple months ago and cracked a couple ribs and really had a rough time with that. And then he had some blood in his cerebral spinal fluid, and they found out that he had bone spurs in his spine, and they took him down to Duke and they did emergency surgery and put a wire mesh between that. So Paul's recovering, that's why Paul's not here. He is back to work. He went back on Wednesday, but just briefly, so he's trying to get back on his feet. So I'm sorry Paul's not here. Paul, I wrote this down because to describe him, how many people have met Paul? Y'all, I mean, most of y'all. I wrote this down because this is the best way to describe him. You fall in love with the people who make you love the person you are when you're around them. And I have to tell you, it's so important to have a mentor like that and have friends like that, because every time you're with somebody like him, you walk away feeling better, like you're a better person. And hanging around with Paul, I got to know him when he was running for governor back in '89. I got to work on his campaign, and ever since then, him and Rosemary have just seen what they've done for people, how they loved. I mean, they have 5,000 students at CNU, and you talk to any student at CNU, they know they have met them, and not too many people have that close of a relationship. You know, my first experience with Paul Tribble was, and I'll tell you, I was giving a speech in Hampton. I used to be a city councilman for Newport News, and I was giving a speech in Hampton. And I was driving on the freeway, and it was pouring rain out. It was before cell phones, and there was a lady in a station wagon in the rain with a flat tire. And I pulled over, helped her with a flat tire, and I get to the speech late, and I'm soaking wet in a suit, and I've got mud on my, from the dirty tires and all over there. And I get up to the podium, and there's like 500 people up there, and I say, "I'm sorry, I'm late. It's all Paul Tribble's fault." And I had to explain. Everybody's quiet, and they go, "How can that be Paul Tribble's fault?" And I go, "Well." I told them I was driving along, and I saw this lady, with a flat tire, and I'm running late for a speech. And I had to stop because what flashed in my head was the story that I heard from a lady a while back, that she was stuck on the, what's the Williamsburg Parkway, the Parkway. And it was when those murders were taking place. And she was at night, she had a flat tire, and it was raining out. And a guy pulled up, to her, knocked on the window, and she rolled it down a little bit. She's afraid to let anybody in because of the murders. And he said, "Pop your hood, I'll fix your flat," and took care of her flat and everything, and then followed her to the gas station and made sure she was okay. And then he drove away, just, took care of her. And never once did that man say that he was a U.S. Senator. Yeah, and I thought, wow, I've got a U.S. Senator that's going to pull over and help change a flat. So I thought, here's a lady on the side, and I'm just a city councilman. I got to pull over. and I think the reason I just started off with that story is that's really true leadership, is when you can change people by your behavior. People can give these wonderful speeches, but their behavior doesn't lie. When you see the way they act around people, the way they honor everybody, I have to tell you that that's an inspiration. And by having a relationship with someone like Paul Tribble and being around people and hearing stories about Paul has really changed my life and has motivated me. Not to mention just Paul, but Rosemary too. I don't know if you've heard Rosemary speak. Has anybody heard her speak on her Fear to Freedom? She was raped, and she has written a book, and she has started an organization that's helping to help mostly with college kids, but it's to help people who've been raped, and male and female, but mostly female. And she also tells a really good story, if you ever bring in as a speaker, how she met Mother Teresa. And she did missions work with Mother Teresa in Calcutta. That is a story. You got to bring her in. I'll wreck it if I tell you any more about it. But that kind of, when I heard her give that speech, and she told me about that, and she almost adopted a child, because Mother Teresa's big thing was adoption. And people would ask Mother Teresa, because she's Catholic, what's your opinion on abortion? And she had the perfect answer. She goes, I'm for adoption, a third choice. And after listening to, I was motivated by Mother Teresa too, but after listening to Rosemary, my wife and I adopted, and we adopted my son, Chris, who's now 22. He was born to a single mom in Virginia Beach. He's mixed race, and the mom was 18, it was her second child, so she knew she couldn't handle one boy, being a single mom, but handling two, she knew it wasn't good, she couldn't do it. And so we did an open adoption. So we got Chris right when the day after he was born. We did an open adoption. And so that way we could stay in contact with the birth parents too. But that's what it's saying, when you have relationships with people like the Tribbles, that motivates you to see how you can get out of your comfort zone and to do something. Now, that's a challenge though, in adopting a child, because that's a commitment. My daughter and my daughter is our child. She's our first child. We were told we couldn't have children, and we started the adoption process, and my wife got pregnant, so we have a daughter. My daughter has her master's in family counseling and in art therapy, and she's just finishing up her PhD. We were talking about that. We do missions work in Honduras for orphan helpers. I wore my shirt for orphan helpers. And we go down to Honduras. Orphan helpers in different countries, but we chose just to stay in Tegucigalpa. We work with 3 orphanages. And a lot of times we do fundraising. But mostly we go down really just to stay connected with the kids. If you ever done missions work in a third world nation, you come back really blessed to be in the United States. Being an American, we are the richest. I think it's 6% of the world. We think this is, we don't have it that great, but we do. Our poorest of poor here in this country is wealthy. I can tell you there's some people in Honduras that made it to the United States, and they live in the ghetto in New York City, which we would consider pretty bad, and they think they've made it. They got running water, they got fairly safe, they got public libraries and schools that are open and running electricity. So, that's pretty amazing. When we were in Honduras, we worked in the orphanages. And basically, we're meeting with the kids, and we also have a prison mission with orphan helpers. Now, I wasn't interested in going to the prisons. typical thing, you want to work with the kids, and the orphanages look like concentration camps. They have barbed wire and it's cement. A lot of them were built in the 60s by the Peace Corps, when the Peace Corps was really big during the Kennedy administration. In fact, one of the orphanages is called the Little House of Kennedy that we work in. And it's mostly from Americans coming. In fact, when we fly down, almost everybody on the airplane are from the United States doing mission works in Honduras. When we went to the prison, and this is God's hand in opening my thinking, but I really didn't want to work in the prisons. But when you think about it, most of the kids that if you're a kid in Honduras, it's usually safer to live on the streets than to live in the house, because the girls are being physically and sexually abused, and they basically go on the streets from about 5 or 6, and the boys, they usually, they're typical kids, they're problems, terrible 2s and 3s, and the parents usually just kick them out of the house. So these kids are living on the streets, and if you're going to live on the streets, you got to eat. And in order to eat and be safe, you got to join a gang. And if you want to be able to have a successful gang, you deal in drugs and guns. That's just the way they were. So most of the kids that are in the prisons are orphans that just didn't have a choice in their life. And so I went into the prisons, and then we were at the women's prison, and as soon as I walked in, Elizabeth was with her friend. Elizabeth is a 13-year-old girl, but she looks like she's 8 because of malnutrition. Most of the kids don't mature. So just imagine an 8-year-old girl, she's playing with her friend, and she accidentally ran into a metal beam and cracked her head open. And I have a degree in emergency medicine, so it's the first thing I do when I walk into the prison. There's this little girl, she runs into a wall, and there's just blood everywhere. So, and head injuries bleed. So the first thing I did was, I was doing butterfly Band-Aids on her. I didn't have to stitch it up, and cleaned her up and held her, and because she was crying, and took care of Elizabeth. And then I was there to examine most. They don't have any doctors come in, so I examined most of the kids, took care of them. We had brought in soccer balls to play with the kids and everything, and I worked with the kids as I examined them. Elizabeth was still kind of shaky, having a head injury, so I had her hold on to my stethoscope and and help me out, being kind of, I made her my makeshift nurse, just to make sure, feel good. I like to play with kids. It's one of my. I'm glad I'm not a pediatrician. I get no work done, but and so I got really bonded with Elizabeth. She's very cute. She's 8. She looks like she's 8, and after about a couple of hours, the kids are playing. We got the kids playing soccer and everything, and you're not supposed to ask them, but she told me why she's in prison, and the reason she's in prison is because she's a murderer. And she had joined a gang when she was 5, and a rival gang killed one of her gang members, and they retaliated and burned a house down, burned the wrong house down, killed some innocent people. And I sat with her and hugged her, and I learned that God can forgive you for any sin. And it took a little girl to convince me that even a murderer can be forgiven. I don't know about the rest of you, but you always put a hierarchy on sin, but God doesn't do that, and He taught me that lesson in the prison, and Elizabeth now is in the halfway house, and she is her education. We're trying to get her education up. Now she's about 18, 19. She has probably about a 5th grade education, so. When we go down, we bring laptops, and we have Spanish software and everything. So Elizabeth's also learning English too. So she wants to be a nurse. So I hope she makes it. But there's hope for her. When we were doing the work in the different orphanages, we met all the kids. And the story I tell you about Elizabeth is pretty much the story for all the girls. Okay. they're physically and sexually abused they at home, and they left, and then they did some bad stuff on the streets because it was the only way to survive and eat. So we were at, I think one of the days I met a medical group that from Maine, a bunch of medical doctors that were setting up a makeshift MASH unit in the dumps. There's 3 big dumps in Tegucigalpa. Tegucigalpa is the capital in Honduras, and there's kids that live in the dumps because the dump is where you can get your recyclables, and you can go through when the dump trucks come in, and you can get your your metals and whatever it is to recycle, and sell it on the street, and then you can have a meal that day. So there's at the dumps you got hundreds of kids living. So when we got to the dump to build this MASH unit, first of all, getting over the smell of the dump, okay? Because I mean, it's awful, and there's broken glass and there's nails. I mean, it's pretty dangerous walking in a dump. It's not as organized as the United States. I mean, you think of a dump being pretty bad here, but at least they're organized and they got dump trucks. I mean, then it's not organized. It's smelly. There's wild dogs running around. You look eating garbage. I mean, it's pretty gross. And you get there and you get to see a couple hundred kids sleeping on cardboard, sleeping in the dump. I mean, and living in it, it's just awful. I mean, I never did get used to the smell of it. And we had a makeshift MASH unit, and we were taking care of kids, and 99% of it, there's infections. That's what we got big problems with that. The kids have so many bad things going on with them, with their health. And this one kid comes up to us and gave us a box, that he had found because he was rummaging through the trash looking for some recyclables. And there's a kid in the box, and he's alive. Somebody had thrown him away, and the kids had named him Onye. And we tried to save him, and we didn't. And I lost it. I started crying. I just to throw away a kid in the trash, it was just too much for me. Plus everything that was going on, and I just lost it. I couldn't function. So I was at the dump, and I was just wandering. I didn't know, what I was going to do. I just couldn't do anything. And all of a sudden, this guy shows up with this stainless steel, looks like an ice cream cart. And I was just looking at it, I go, you're going to try to sell ice cream to these kids? I mean, I couldn't understand it. So I went up to the guy, and I was like, you need a different business model or something. And right on the side was of it was a Rotary symbol. And I said, well, I'm a Rotarian. I belong to a Rotary, and what is this? And he goes, well, come on, give me, what are you doing? I said, I'm not doing anything right now. And he goes, hey, come with me, we'll do this. And this guy is a dropout student from Mississippi Bible College. He dropped out his first year, didn't do so well in college, and he had worked his way down to Honduras. And what he does is he's worked with the Rotaries, and he's got 17 of these portable solar ovens. And what he does is every day he's got people organized throughout the city, and he puts up this solar dish, and it gets it warm enough, and we make bread, and we bake bread in the oven. So I just helped him the whole day making bread. And then he has these filters, and believe it or not, these giant plastic filters is like an aquifer. You put different layers of rock and sand, and you'll take the muddiest water, put it in there, and 20 minutes later, you as an engineer, you know this, 20 minutes later, you get the freshest water in the world. You could take the sewer water and drink it, and it filters it. And so we're getting bread and water for these kids. That's what we're doing. And these filters are made in Newport News, Virginia. Talk about a small world. And so I spent, after seeing Onye and die, I just spent the whole day making bread and water, and we support him now. He does these missions work. And to think that an American dropout student is doing this, been doing it for 17 years. Yeah, it's just amazing. When I met him, it's been 20-some years since then. So I'm telling you that to see what the United States, what we are doing in Honduras, you hear so much about Hondurans trying to get into the United States illegally, and you hear all these. It's terrible there, and I understand people wanting to have a new life, but it's really. I just wish that we could continue to do. It's become the murder capital of the world, so Tegucigalpa is pretty dangerous. But I just wish we could continue to what we're trying to do is trying to get the country to help itself. And for the United States, we're usually a brain drain for the best and the brightest around the world. I did missions work in Guyana, and I worked with a teacher, and her daughter was brilliant, and by the time she was 12, she had read every book in the library. Now, the library wasn't big, but she had, I mean, that's pretty impressive at 12 years old to have read all the books. And so we used to go to Guyana all the time and got to know her very well. And we brought her up, and she stayed with us for 2 years and went to Menchville High School, and then she ended up going to Berkeley. And she's now has her master's and lives in California, and she just got married. That's unfortunately that's what we do in the United States. We've been a brain drain. So again, that left Guyana without their brilliant and their brightest. They're in the they come to the United States, go to college, and then they stay in the United States. So what we're trying to do with Orphan Helpers is try to get them to help themselves, and it's a Christian-based organization. So we're trying to connect with the churches so that they continue to support the kids once they get out of the orphanages. The last thing I wanted to do is tell you about the guy that runs these solar ovens.